For 200,000 ringgit, there are a lot of cars that you could buy. Things like the Volkswagen Passat, for example, or any myriad of SUVs. But Toyota wants you to remember the Camry, because this was the ubiquitous large family car for a long time. But because its original customer base is beginning to expire, Toyota realizes that it is time for the Camry to get with the times. And so it is now bolder, sharper, more powerful, and more efficient than ever before. And it thinks that it's totally worth its 200,000 ringgit price point. My name is Aiman Abdullah. This is Malaysian Motoring. This is our review of the 2022 Toyota Camry. Now, the Camry was introduced about 3 years ago, this 8th generation model at least, and it has gone on to be Malaysia's #1 D-segment saloon. And so for this update, visually, not much has changed. The lower grille, or the bumper, has been updated ever so slightly, which now makes it a little bit sleeker, and you have these contrasting silver elements on the side of the lower grille to emphasize the width. You also get a slightly redesigned grille in order to, again, emphasize the space, and the radar system in this car has been updated as part of the updated Safety Sense suite, but we'll get to that in a moment. The best part about this car is that a lot of things haven't changed because they didn't have to. This car has always been very good looking, and so down the side you can see this profile remains very muscular and very bold. You do get new 18-inch alloy wheels though, which does look a little bit nice. And they are wrapped in Bridgestone Turanza tires, which means performance both dry, wet, and in terms of noise should be pretty good. Now, one of the other updates to this car is that you now get, these aren't exposed jacking points, these are now carpet lights, which are impossible to trigger. There we go. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, very specific requirements. And when they do, they provide this BMW-esque carpet of light, which illuminates the side in order for you to see puddles and whatever else there might be there. The rear doors remain very large and very easy to get in and out of, and we'll talk about the rear segment in a bit. But at the back, again, you can see that Toyota has merely built on the already good-looking shape of the Camry. The only change back here are these tail lights, where they are now ever so slightly smoked, but otherwise everything remains the same. I do appreciate the twin tailpipes on this car because they are functional and they provide a pretty decent noise for a 2.5-litre 4-cylinder. Now, in the boot, you will find the Camry's party piece, which is a very large boot. Now, the rear seats no longer fold, but in terms of size, you can put at least 3 or 4 golf bags in here. There is, however, no underfloor storage, so to speak of, underneath this black plastic cover, because down here you just have a jack and some other stuff, and that's about it. There is a spare tire down here, a little one of those space saver donuts. But for the most part, these cars still come very well equipped because they do still come with a tire inflator kit. So if you have a small puncture that doesn't necessarily require a full tire change, you can just use that instead. Now, you will notice that the boot of the Camry is not powered. This, I'm sure, will rankle potential buyers of the Volkswagen Passat because that car does come with a powered tailgate. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not difficult to close the boot, and opening it is quick. And closing it is even quicker. Trust me, you will care about that in the rain. Where you won't care about the rain, however, is inside, where there are more small changes to talk about. Now, inside the new Camry, a lot has changed, but also a lot hasn't changed. So what hasn't changed is the basic interior architecture of this car. So you still have the same dash design, the same seat design, the same center console design, although that didn't have to change because it wasn't broken. What has changed are things like trim materials and small details. So for example, the trim here now is no longer the Japanese plasti-wood. Instead, you have this very technical design, and the overall cabin is lit up by nice little bits of brushed aluminium trim. You also get some ambient lighting dotted throughout the place, and although it is minimal, nowhere near the kind of thing that you get in proper luxury cars, it is still nice to have. The other thing that's nice to have is the new redesigned center stack, where you now have the screen sitting on top of the aircon vents rather than nestled in the middle, and it is now 8 inches in size, which means the screen is larger, brighter, and it comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is a much needed upgrade. The sound system is still JBL though, so that's The other improvement to this car is in terms of the climate control. Where this car used to come with 2-zone climate control, you now get 3-zone climate control. And the controls themselves have been redesigned to sit in this nice little space here, and the buttons are nice and tactile as expected from a Toyota. In terms of the driving position, everything falls very easily to hand and everything sits exactly where you expect it to be. These two front seats are powered with memory setting on the driver's side, and the steering column is even electrically adjustable, which I could do if the car was on. Ta-da! This, I'd like to point out, is very important because a lot of luxury cars do not offer electrically adjustable steering wheels. So this is rather nice to have. And now I suspect my video editor is making a noise because the screen has now screwed up the lighting setting. Let me try and shut this off. Does someone listen to me? No. Okay. So other accoutrements in here include things like a Qi wireless charger, a USB port down here in order to connect to your Android Auto, a rather large center console, and a rather large, it's done the thing again, and a rather large glove box, which is all very nice. The one thing that this car doesn't have, two things actually, is it doesn't come with a digital instrument cluster, which is okay because the digital screen in between the analog dials is very bright and very crisp, which means you can get all the information that you need rather easily. And because the dials are very clear, it's very easy for you to figure out both the engine and vehicle speed without too many issues. This screen does not want to shut off. The other issue that this car has, not so much of an issue, but it would have been nice if these seats were ventilated, because you can get ventilated seats on the Toyota Harrier, for example, as well as several other Toyota models like the RAV4. So the fact that you have perforation here, but no ventilation, is a bit unfortunate. That said though, the seats in the back, now that's something to talk about. Now in the back of the Camry, as you can see, I have absolutely acres of legroom, and the seat bases are long enough that I get plenty of under-thigh support. Rear accoutrements are pretty good. There are a couple of USB-A ports underneath the rear aircon vents in the center tunnel. There are rear aircon vents in the center tunnel. You also get a little bit more ambient lighting, like I pointed out earlier, and you get sunshades, manual on the side and electric in the rear. Now the reason why I have this center console down is to emphasize the fact that there are two ISOFIX mounts, so you can put two child seats back here and separate them via the center console, but more importantly, there are lots of goodies in here. So you press this and you get cup holders. Not very interesting. You press this and you have a full touch panel back here. So this allows you to change your temperature. It also allows you to change the rear sunshade, and it even allows you to change the recline angle on the seats electrically. Now this is the first in the Malaysian D segment, allowing you to sit more upright like this, or you can lean back if you want to snooze. Now to facilitate snoozing, the rear headrests have also been redesigned, so there are little flanks on either side to hold your head in place should you want to take a nap. This means that the Camry is doing its best to affirm its position as one of the best mid-size chauffeur-driven saloons currently available. The one downside back here, however, is because of these twin power seats. Like I mentioned earlier, the rear seats no longer fold, which means if you want added practicality, all you've got now is this tiny little ski hatch, which is about that tall and about that wide, which means unless you are quite literally carrying skis, there's not really much that you can do back here. But overall, rear accoutrements are pretty good. And of course, if you're sat in the boss seat, there are still boss switches here for you to adjust the front passenger seat, so you get even more legroom should you need it. As far as I'm concerned, this all looks pretty good. But the bigger changes come from the engine room. Now the big change to the new Camry comes under the bonnet. Out is the old 2.5-litre 4-cylinder, and in comes a new dynamic force 2.5-litre 4-cylinder. This engine, although naturally aspirated, produces a little over 200 horsepower and a little over 250 Newton meters of torque, making it both more powerful and more torquey than the engine it replaces. Power continues to go to the front wheels, but it now goes through an 8-speed automatic gearbox, which again improves efficiency as well as NVH when you're out on the road. The reason why we're doing this segment is because this is a very special engine. Due to things like D4S dual injection systems, as well as smaller changes to the engine to reduce friction, for example, its improved thermal efficiency is now rated at 40%, making this one of the most efficient internal combustion petrol engines currently available in the world. And as a result, it should mean that this Camry should be both fun to drive and more efficient to drive as well. So now that we've covered the engine, let's actually go and get it going. Now, driving the new Toyota Camry, there are quite a few updates that are worth talking about, primarily relating to that engine. So when this generation Camry first arrived, it was lamented that it continued to soldier on with the old 2.5 litre and a 6-speed automatic box. The reason being because that engine was quite old. And so customers buying into a car like this wanted the newest engine from Toyota with the newest powertrain, the newest gearbox, to enjoy the benefits that come with that newer powertrain, things like the improved fuel consumption and improved performance. And now all of that is here. So for starters, driving this car around in normal mode, the engine feels a lot more peppy and responsive than before. This means that driving through traffic, for example, is now a lot easier because through cut and thrust traffic, it's a lot easier for you to merge or change lanes, for example. And of course, when you're on the motorway, as we sampled when we first previewed this car, you can check out the link to that in the corner. We also managed to figure out that on the motorway, because of the added torque and the added power, this car cruises with greater ease than before, and it does so with a much better fuel consumption figure than before. Now, when we went to Gambang and back, because we've also driven this car for a little while now, we figured out that with highway cruising as well as some town driving and so on, you should be able to get about 8.5 to 9 litres per 100 kilometers. This might not seem particularly great, but when you consider the fact the old car used to do well north of 10 litres, that is a very palpable improvement. And of course, the other thing is, because of this new powertrain, this car is a lot more quiet than before. So when you're driving on the motorway, the engine isn't howling like it used to because it's able to rev, or rather sit at a much lower RPM than before, thanks to that gearbox. Now, talking about refinement, that's always been a very strong point in the Camry. It's always been something that it held very highly, especially against vehicles like the Honda Accord. And to that end, this new Camry is much the same. In fact, even compared to more sophisticated competitors, such as the Volkswagen Passat, this car is a lot more quiet. There is a lot less road noise from the Bridgestone Turanza tires, and there is a lot less wind noise as well. I'm not quite sure what it is that Toyota does to its cars to get it quite this way, but the sum of its parts is certainly something worth noting, because this car is amazingly quiet and amazingly refined. What has changed for this facelift, however, is the ride and handling. So Toyota's sort of desire to no longer make boring cars means that even vehicles like the Camry are now a lot more engaging to drive. So this car is built on the Toyota New Global Architecture, or TNGA platform, and with this new dynamic force engine, it means that finally this car's dynamics and the powertrain can come together in harmony. Going through back roads and tight, winding kampong roads, for example, is now a much more enjoyable experience in this car. And when you're on the highway, it has a certain degree of stability that the Camry did not have before. The only trouble is that secondary ride is now a little bit stiffer in order to give that car a bit more dynamic feel and verve. And as a result, it does mean that it no longer glides and floats the way it used to on motorways, but arguably that is a better thing. Trust me, this car is not nearly as planted or as solid feeling as a Volkswagen Passat in terms of how it deals with undulations. This still feels very much like a Japanese car. But overall, it certainly feels like there is a lot less compromise in terms of just how this car handles itself, especially at speed. Now, when you're not speeding, you can, of course, enjoy this car's safety systems. Now, this car comes with an updated Toyota safety suite of systems, which means the adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, blind spot monitoring have all been improved. So this car now comes with a rear cross-traffic alert with rear AEB. The forward-facing AEB now can detect pedestrians and cyclists in the day and pedestrians at night, further improving this car's capabilities. And in terms of the adaptive cruise control, in addition to now having stop and go function through traffic, it also has this thing called cornering assist. So for example, if you were to set the cruise control at say 120, when you turn the wheel, the car senses the change of direction and it will slow it down, allowing you to drive through corners with a bit more confidence without having to interfere with the car nearly as much. And on top of that, if you're using the adaptive cruise control, this car now comes with something called overtake assist, where if you are behind a slower moving vehicle and you indicate to overtake, the car will actually speed up safely within the gap that it has, so that when you do overtake, you can merge into faster traffic with greater ease. All of this means that this car now drives with a much more natural feel. And that means that you can leave the systems to do the majority of the work more often. This will no doubt help Camry buyers, both driving in town and out on the motorway, because that now means that this car is now a lower stress environment than before. And overall, it is very difficult to fault this car. Of course, if you want the punch of a turbocharged engine, you may prefer vehicles like the Volkswagen Passat. And if you want something with a lower road tax, because this is ultimately a 2.5-litre engine, if you want to save on road tax because you're really cheap and you really shouldn't be buying this segment anyway, then you might be better swayed by the Honda Accord. But that doesn't mean that this is a bad car, not in any measure at all. Because with all things considered, when you buy a D-segment saloon, you want something that is both comfortable and engaging. And engaging was something where the Camry used to fall short. But I'm happy to report that this new Camry certainly makes up for where it's fallen short in the past. So much so, in fact, that even I, in my mid-20s, would consider a car like this. And that is something that's very different from the vehicles before, where the Camry's traditional buyer base have been in their 40s or retired. As a younger, more energetic individual, I wouldn't mind a car like this because not only does it look good, it also drives well. And that is not something the Camry used to be able to boast about. This is a much improved car in every possible measure. If I wanted to nitpick, there are a few things about this car that I do not like. Number one is those powered rear seats. Now, while it is very novel for a car like this to have a feature like that, and no doubt those of you looking for a D-segment saloon to be chauffeured in would like features like that, I personally prefer rear seats that fold flat because that means that the vehicle is more practical, so in case I need to move larger items, I can do that in my large saloon. The other thing, which I think more people may agree on, is the quality of the 360-degree camera. Admittedly, the 360-degree camera in this car is absolutely laughable. You can get much better systems in much more affordable cars. Even the Prodor Alza comes with a much better 360-degree camera system. The one in this car is not only low res, but the interface is so confusing and so difficult to use that it means that ultimately you won't be using it that much at all. And that is a crying shame, because why have a feature if it's not actually usable, right? But those are the only detractions I have when it comes to the Camry, because aside from that, this car is pretty brilliant. I love the fact the fuel consumption in this car is very predictable because it's a naturally aspirated engine, so you don't have the huge fluctuations that you would normally get with a turbocharged car. I love how comfortable these seats are. I love the fact that it comes with memory functionality. I would love for it to have ventilated seats, but it's not too bad, and the air conditioning in this car is very cold. So even on a hot day, I don't think I'll be suffering for too long. Overall, Toyota has once again proven why it is one of the biggest car makers in the world. With vehicles like this that are now more engaging and more dynamic for drivers, while still retaining the hallowed tenets of Toyota ownership, like a hassle-free experience both during purchase and after sales, as well as the vaunted reliability that comes with that Toyota badge, this is a very difficult vehicle to fault. I would absolutely recommend this to someone looking for a large family car or looking for a large saloon to be chauffeur driven in, because frankly it is near faultless. Although of course if you want a vehicle that's more dynamic, perhaps consider the Mazda 6, which also comes with a very comprehensive suite of active safety features. It just lacks adaptive cruise control. And of course, if you want something that is far more dynamic in straight lines, for example, if you do a lot of motorway cruises and so you want something with a bit more torque, then naturally consider the Volkswagen Passat, another car that we like quite a lot. But if you want a solid all-rounder that comes with a solid reliability rating and the reassurance of knowing that this is a car that will most likely outlast you, then consider the Toyota Camry. This is an excellent car, and I have no doubt that buyers will be very happy with this even over the longer term. In any case, that's been our review of the 2022 Toyota Camry. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, jangan bodoh.